My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Thursday, August 13th, 2015, and I am in Locust Grove, Mays County, Oklahoma, visiting with Dr. David Fleming as part of the Cowboys in Every County Oral History Project. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Dr. Fleming, let's begin and learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
I was born in 1960 in Garden Grove, California, actually.
Okay.
My father is from here at Locust Grove, and he had moved to California for work, actually. And that's where he met my mother, and so that's where I was born. I lived there in Anaheim until I was 7 years old, and we moved back onto the family farm, I guess is the best way to say that, southwest of Locust Grove. And that's where I grew up.
And what did your father do in California?
He actually was an upholsterer. He worked for McDonnell Douglas and did upholstery and carpet and aircraft.
Okay.
It's passenger, I think, commercial aircraft.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about growing up on the family farm.
Oh, it was wonderful, you know. We had cows, chickens. I even raised chickens. It was, well, probably when I was about 11 years old, somewhere in there. I started raising chickens, so I'd raise pullets and sell them. There used to be a little local sale here. It used to be a sale barn where they'd sell cattle. They also had a flea market, basically. And so I would raise chickens and take them. That's my first ag project. I would take them and sell them. And so it was wonderful. We played with June bugs on strings in the spring or in the summer, actually, when they came out. Run around barefoot. Absolutely enjoyed it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Wonderful memories.
And did you have chores growing up on the farm?
Oh my gosh, yes. Chores started early. You had to feed and water everything and clean up, and so chores started early and ran late. There was always chores after school for sure. I had to take off those school clothes and do the chores, so plenty of chores. And I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of the kids, especially like my grandkids, they need more chores, I think. It helps instill a sense of discipline and work ethic, so it's a good thing.
And talk to me a little bit about where you attended school here in Mays County.
Locust Grove from the third grade through senior, and of course played football and several other different things. I actually didn't go through the FFA program. I went through the 4-H program. Enjoyed that, but I started wrestling and football, and so because of that, I didn't have enough time. Chores, and so it made it difficult to find time to do everything. So I did mainly football and sports, a lot of sports, of course. Graduated from Locust Grove in 1979, and had been my dream since 11 years old to be a veterinarian. And so there wasn't but one place to go, and that was for OSU. So I had spent my senior years, or not senior years, high school years, preparing for OSU, and was lucky enough to get a scholarship, academic scholarship, to OSU. So that was my main goal, I guess, as I became older.
So what got you kind of interested on the veterinarian track when you were younger?
I can tell you almost to the day. I was 11 years old, and we had some horses, and I had one colt that I was very fond of, and I had handled it from a weanling and everything else, first horse I ever broke. And he developed these bumps, and I didn't know what they were. So we called the veterinarians out of Pryor. At that time, it was Dr. Jaggers. And he came and looked at the horse, and I was just enthralled with him. My gosh, this guy is a veterinarian, and he has lots of knowledge, and look at he handles the animals. And so from that point on, I wanted to be a veterinarian. There was no question, no doubt. Actually. My son, for years, he couldn't decide what he wanted to do, and I could understand that one bit because I knew the whole time. So I think that's part of the problem anymore with young people is there's so many choices, so many things you can do. Anything's possible. You know, I've had the opportunity now to be in several different countries, and you see how the opportunities that those folks have are very limited. You know, most of them are in social economic situations that they'll never be able to escape from. Here in the United States, you can do anything. You can be anything. It's just ever how hard you want to work and apply yourself. And so I think that's part of the problem. But I didn't have that. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a veterinarian. So.
Would you start doctoring things as you were growing up?
Well, I tried, but I didn't have much knowledge, you know. All the farmers try to doctor as much as they can before they call a veterinarian, you know. Veterinarians cost money. And so, of course, my grandfather had cows all of his life. And, of course, there was all kinds of home treatments, home remedies. Kerosene cured everything. And so, sure, yeah, we'd try to treat them at home the best we could, but you know, there's situations where you have to have the medicine and the knowledge of how to use it in order to get them better. And so, yes, we did lots of home treatment, I guess.
So, in this part of the state, is it common for a lot of students to head down to Stillwater?
No. Well, I guess let me say that again. For different majors and stuff there is, yes. You know, I think there's a pretty good draw, especially for the ag program here, the FFA program. The instructor is Joe Bob Cunningham. He's a graduate of OSU. I think all of his kids are graduates of OSU. And he really emphasizes agricultural degrees that OSU has, and not just agricultural degrees, but other degrees. And so, you know, he's been, I think, a tremendous plus. Plus, you know, the kids here do a lot of contests at OSU. And so there's actually a decent amount, I think, I don't know what the percentage is, people that end up going to OSU because of the opportunities there. And a lot of them go locally. You know, there's some local colleges that they go to, NSU. A lot of people go there for teaching degrees. But when I went, there was just 2 of us from our class that went to OSU. And of course, it was, oh my gosh, we didn't go to NEO or any other junior college. This guy Clifford Lemons and I, we played football together. So we went straight to OSU, and my gosh, you talk about a shock. Coming from Locust Grove, Oklahoma, going to Stillwater, you know, Stillwater seemed like a big metropolis. It did at that time. And I think probably one of my greatest challenges when I got there was studying. I thought I knew how to study. You know, I thought I had decent study habits. I didn't have study habits, truthfully. And that was probably the biggest shock, is when I got down there and realized just how serious everybody was. Each instructor was serious about their class, and I really expected you to learn that stuff. And of course, wanting to be a veterinarian, I realized that my GPA was everything. And so, yeah, my first semester was a shock of my life. I came home after the first semester and discussed it with my father and said, you know, I don't know. I said, I have to have a high GPA. I think I had like it was a 2.75 at the end of my semester. And I said, you know, that's not going to work. I'll never get in with that. And so I withdrew for a year, actually, and had to really think about, you know, is that really what I wanted to do? Was I really going to put that much effort into it? So after working as an electrician, actually, for a year, I had made my mind that I was going to go back. And so when I went back, so I started in the fall of '79. And then I didn't go back until actually the fall of '82. It was 2 years. I went back in the fall of '82 and stayed with it. Made the grade that time. I think I was too naive and not quite knowledgeable enough when I first went down there.
When was the first time you came to campus? Was it?
When I first came to campus was the spring of 1978. My wrestling coach at that time, Don Hill, wanted to take us down there. There was, I don't remember, 3 or 4 of us, and show us the campus. And he had graduated from OSU, and so he took us down there. And that was actually my first time on the campus, and I enjoyed it immensely. But you know, he warned us. He said, you know, when you come down here, he said, there's lots of fun, down there. If you're not careful, you'll spend way too much time on the fun and not enough time studying. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty. My first semester, I had a lot of fun. We went to parties and all the activities. There's something, actually more than one thing going on every day, activities of any kind. And so because of that opportunity, you can kind of get wrapped up in that social aspect of school and sometimes miss the academic, or don't not pay enough attention to the academic part of school.
Well, when you initially went down, how did you get down there? Did your parents take you down? Or?
Actually, no, I drove. I was a graduate then, so
What were you driving?
I was driving a 1979 Monte Carlo. I bought it. I'd saved my money, and so I went and bought a new car before I went to OSU. That's exactly what I tried to buy, something that had decent fuel mileage and everything else. So that's exactly what I drove down.
And where did you live on campus?
Stout Hall. That had been a female dormitory. They that year had remodeled it and made it into a male dormitory. And so we stayed in Stout Hall, no air conditioning, fans only, second floor. That's just where I started out at, and met some wonderful guys down there. Had too much fun. Had too much fun, but I really enjoyed it because at that time we had to eat in Willard, which was still a girls' dormitory, female dormitory. So that's where we'd have to eat. So that's where we'd meet all the girls. We'd just go over and eat. But they wouldn't serve food on Sunday at that time. They'd serve breakfast, but they wouldn't serve food. So you had to come up with a way to eat. Towards the end of the semester, you're broke and spend all your money. And so it was hard to find something to eat on Sunday without having to go to a restaurant and pay for it. So that was quite challenging, but enjoyed it. Really did. Really enjoyed it.
And was your initial roommate Clifford, or?
No, actually, my initial roommate, I switched. This gentleman was from Yukon, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember his name, but him and I had completely different styles. He wasn't a bad guy, but he had completely different styles, and so that didn't work well. And then they put me in. I switched rooms to a gentleman. His name is Bill. I don't remember what his last name was. I'm remembering. I don't remember what his last name was, but he was a wild guy as well. He wasn't there to go to school. Mm-hmm. He was there to party. Mm-hmm. And I just amazed. I would wake up and he'd come in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning every night. And they used to have steam tunnels. The tunnels underneath the campus where they run all the steam pipes and everything. Those guys would go down in there, and just amazing some of the stories he would tell. But that was the rest of the semester. Like I said, I don't remember his last name, but Clifford and I didn't room together. We thought it wouldn't be a good thing. we decided that wouldn't be a good thing, that we needed to room with someone that perhaps was a little bit more academic minded than we were. So yeah, Clifford stayed that second semester. Like I said, I came home, but Clifford stayed that second semester, and I don't remember. I kind of lost touch with him. He didn't graduate. He stayed a few years and then went to, his dad was a construction worker, that's what my dad ended up being, was a construction worker. They knew each other. Mm-hmm. And so Clifford finally went to the construction field and has done very well for himself. Mm-hmm. Very, very good guy.
So you took that semester off, reevaluated, worked a little bit. What was motivating you to want to come back?
Well, I still had that desire to be a veterinarian, and I went and worked, got an electrician's union, made pretty good money and everything, but I still had that desire to be a veterinarian, and it was stronger than anything else, so that's why I came back.
So when you came back to campus, where'd you live?
I lived off campus.
Okay.
I got married during that time as well, and so we bought a place south of the fairgrounds.
Okay.
And so I bought a trailer house, put on there. And so, and actually that was a good decision for me because, I could come home and get away from that and study. And that's what I had to do. I had a lot of studying to do. And so actually that worked out very well. And we lived there the whole 8 years, actually.
And where did you meet your wife?
Here, she was from Locust Grove as well.
Okay.
She went to high school here, graduated a couple of years behind I.
Okay. So, kind of walk me through now. You're back at OSU.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some memorable classes you remember, instructors you remember.
Oh my goodness.
Pre-vet school.
Pre-veterinary school, lots of good instructors. Probably one of the ones I remember, and it's sadly enough I don't remember her name. She wasn't there very long. She was from Germany, and but she taught American history. Interesting enough. And I remember my first history test. At that time they were all essay, or just very little. It had a little bit of multiple choice, but by far all essay. And I had a chemistry test right after this history test. And so I was hurrying because I had, chemistry was one of my core requirements for veterinary school. So I had really studied hard for this chemistry class. So I just ripped right through this essay and handed in, and she stopped me. she said, "Are you sure you don't want to sit down and go back over this and maybe add a little more to it?" And of course, stubborn man that I am, "Oh no, it will be all right." I didn't get a 65 on that first one, so I learned my lesson. And the structure tells you that you need to sit down and add a little bit more to your essay. You better sit down and add a little bit more to your essay. But she was the nicest lady, just as kind as she could be. She didn't speak English all that well. But she did a wonderful job teaching American history. But she was one of the first ones that I really remember. And of course, numerous teachers in that period of time. Probably the next one I think that really comes to mind is the biochemistry teacher. And it's crazy, I can't remember his name, but he was there forever. I'm sitting there trying to remember his name. Biochemistry is a colon class. You've got to score well in that biochemistry class, and it's not just for veterinary school. For all medical professions, you have to go through the biochemistry class. And I don't know, it was like the middle of the semester, not quite the middle of the semester, before fall break. And I had really studied hard for this class, and I was making a C, and it's a 5-hour class. That wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so I went to Dr. Nelson. That was his name. So I went to him and made an appointment. He was very busy, very hard. Did a lot of research, so it was very hard to get in there. So I went in to sit down, and he asked me, "Well, what do you need?" And I said, "Well, I'm working hard and studying this class." I said, "I'm only making a C, and I need to make a B." I said, "So I would like to know, look over my stuff. I would like to know what would be your suggestions. What should I do to increase my grade?" He looked through his stuff and looked through my test, and he looked through them on his desk, and he looked up and he said, "You ever thought about doing something else?" I mean, just like that. I was like floored. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, maybe you're not cut out for this." He said, this class is basically a class to determine whether you have the stuff to go to med school or veterinary school or whatever, or whether you don't. And he said, "You've got to see." He said, "I think maybe you ought to be a plumber." I mean, that's exactly what he said. He said, "Maybe something like that." And it just shocked me. And I said, "Well, what do you think I could do?" He said, "It look like you can do much." So just study harder. He said, "Look like you better put more hours in studying." And he said, "You're going to have to make an A on most of your tests at this point to bring it up to a B." And he said, I don't see it. Was basically what he said. And that didn't do anything except motivate me. Mm-hmm. And maybe that was that may have been his psychology behind that. I don't know. If it is, my hat's off to him. I appreciate it. But I've thought about him lots of times over the years after I got in veterinary school and graduated.
Did you make a B?
Yes, I ended up making a B. But I appreciate he did motivate me, but I sure didn't appreciate being shocked, I think, quite that much. But those are probably the two that I remember the most. We, of course, several other instructors over that period of time. Some very good ag instructors. One of them, an older gentleman, taught. It was an international ag class. It was like a basic intro to ag, and we talked about camels, basic treatment for camels, and some other exotic livestock. And of course, at that stage at my point anyway, I thought, well, I'm never going to use something like that. This is not interesting, It's just a 1-hour class. So I didn't pay that much of attention. Well, I ended up going to Africa for a year, and I'm glad he did teach us a little bit about camels, because I ended up working on thousands of them. And so that goes to show you, since you're still in school, even those classes that you're not interested in, you better pay attention to those, because you never know what will happen in the long run.
Wow. And your undergraduate degree was in animal science?
Animal science,
okay.
Pre-veterinary medicine. I don't know if they still have that option, but at that time they had the option where you take that as your major. If you applied and got into veterinary school before you completed your requirements for that bachelor's degree, your first couple semesters of veterinary school, they would apply those to that degree so you could complete the requirements. And that's exactly what I did. And so I didn't get it wasn't awarded my BS until after my first year of veterinary school.
Okay. And did you work during this time frame?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Where'd you work?
Veterinary hospital. That's where actually I worked at several different places. I worked at the swine barn, which used to be right west of the Holiday Inn. And Bob Hope came at one time, this was several years ago, and he opened his doors. He said this on the night that he was talking at OSU. He said, I opened my door to get this breath of beautiful, fresh Oklahoma air, and he said, "Pow." He said, my gosh, it stunk like crazy. Well, it was because it was a swine farm right next to the Holiday Inn. And so I worked there for a few years. A couple years, actually. I worked in the farrowing barn. We deliver baby pigs, which, of course, I just loved that. And then I went and worked at the veterinary school. First, I worked for the lab division, taking care of the rats, mice, all that type of stuff. Had a lot of research calves that we took care of. And then I worked for the veterinary school, cleaning stalls. Mucking out stalls was my glorious job. So I've dealt with a lot of crap over the years. And I worked there all the way until after, I guess, middle of the first semester of the veterinary school, and after that it just couldn't work. Mm-hmm. I worked a small stint in one of the convenience stores. I had the bright idea that if I worked the midnight to 7 shift, I could study. During that slow part of the night. Wow. My gosh, it was just a terrible effort just to stay awake, and I didn't work out very well. I didn't get much studying done, and by the time I always had to. What I do is I that semester I scheduled it so my classes would start at 7:30. So I'd get off work, go straight to the campus. I'd get all my classes out of the way, and then while my wife was at work, and we had a son by that time, he was at daycare. That's when I would sleep. Try to sleep in the afternoon. Well, that didn't work out at all, so I ended up suffering from sleep deprivation, sitting in my classes doing this. I figured out real quickly that wasn't going to work. So after like I said, about the middle of my first semester of veterinary school, you got, my gosh, you average 21 hours a semester, and almost all those classes have a lab. There's just not time. Just absolutely not time. You have to be studying. You can't be working somewhere. So for the last 3.5 years, it didn't work at all. Except during the summer. I did work during the summer.
Well, let's talk about your years at the veterinary school.
Okay.
Professors that come to mind.
Oh, Dr. Brazil, he taught physiology, and my gosh, a brilliant guy. And he wouldn't hesitate one bit to tell you that you weren't very smart, and that you had a lot to learn. And his tests were horrendous, but he was an excellent instructor. He really was a very good instructor. Our anatomy instructors, it was their last year, full year. I think they taught part of the second year. They had been at the veterinary school forever. And you know, my gosh, if you could just glean a little bit of their knowledge, you know, a third of their knowledge, you'd be a wise person. And that's my same thought about the Edmond Lowe Library. I used to sit in that library and you look at all those books, and you think about all that written material. And I used to think that, you know, if a person could learn and maintain a third of the information that's in that library, you'd be the wisest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's just incredible. And they were the same way. They were walking encyclopedias. They taught anatomy. And we had all of our charts and everything they had made personally. We didn't use charts and illustrations much out of textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
They'd made them all over the years, and by, you know, dissecting, and they were just incredible. And Dr. Friend, very good guy, and would go out of his way to help you. You know, but of course their tests were just unbelievable. Probably not the best positive memory. We had an immunology professor. He was from England, and we sat down in class. You know, you only have this perception of professional school. You know, that it's all professional, very staunch, very, you know, organized. He came in and sat down, and he said, "Look," he said, "I'm here because I do research." And he said, "I bring in lots of money doing this research." And I forget what research he was doing at this point. And he said, "I don't have time to teach this class." But he said, "They require me." He said, "This is a land-grant university." And he said, "I have to teach a certain amount." So he said, "I don't have time," so he said, "something has to give." So he said, "This is the deal." He said, "We'll meet every day, 5, 15 minutes, whatever it takes, real quick to go over it." And he said, "That's it. You're on your own." He said, "You've got to study the book and you'll pass the test." And he drew a box up here on the chalkboard, and he drew a small box way over here up higher. And he said, what this amounts to, he said, the first thing you have to do, he said, you have to learn the terminology of medicine. He said, it's a completely different language. So he said, what you need to do for your first few weeks, he said, you need to get you a medical dictionary and basically memorize it. And he said, if you do that, he said, that separates you, he said, that puts you in this box up here, which is a very small box. And it separates you from the rest of the common swine herd in this box. And I was sitting with a guy that was a buddy of mine from McAlester, Oklahoma. He kind of jerked around and he looked at me and he said, you know, he had a beard. He said, I think that fella needs a whooping. And I said, you know, I can't disagree with you a bit. I think he does. He's quite high on himself in his profession. He was a veterinarian. There is truth to that. But that was a heck of a way of putting it. And like I said, I don't remember his name. Now, he was only there for just a couple of semesters, and he left. So that kind of hurt our opinion of professional school. A little group of guys there that I sat with, none of us quite grasped that or agreed with that, but, you know, you have to be proud of your profession. Mm-hmm. And he was very, very proud of his profession. Lots of other instructors, of course, that I can remember. Most of them, I guess, are pretty well retired now. Mm-hmm. Dr. Smith was he was a rural medicine veterinarian. They changed that term pretty often, so I don't know exactly what it is now, but he was a veterinarian that took you out on farm calls. Mm-hmm. And really good guy. I'm in the military. He was in the military at that time. and he was a rough, gruff guy, but you learned a lot from him. Dr. Dawson, he was there. He's getting ready to retire. He's from India, and he was very knowledgeable about sheep and goats. Very, very good guy. And we had a instructor from New Zealand. My goodness, I can't remember his name now. He was a very good instructor as well. So, most of the people that I had the opportunity to learn from there in veterinary school, wonderful instructors. And very, very happy to have that opportunity to learn from them.
Would you have traditions within the vet school?
They do. Of course they have the honor societies. I think I was Omega Tau Sigma was a fraternity that I joined. They have 3 or 4 different fraternities that you can join. And of course they all have their traditions about meetings and gatherings, social functions as far as that is concerned. And the university itself, we didn't really have all that many traditions. There's always some.
Mm-hmm.
They've done more now. They've become much more student friendly over the years. And now they have what they call the white coat ceremony, which I think is an excellent program. And they do. Of course, they always had their mixers where you met the professors, you met the other students from the different classes. All those were very good. They tried to socialize you as much as possible, and especially us country guys that don't always have the best social skills anyway. It was very good, and like I said, I think now they even do a lot more than what they used to do then.
What was graduation like?
Oh, it was wonderful. My gosh. You think about 8 years of grueling studying. For some people, the academic setting, they absolutely prevail. They blossom. That's just right up their alley. For people like me, that was an arduous, painful process to drag me through all that to try to teach me something. And so, of course, to be able to graduate, they're in the stadium with all those wonderful people, and the climax of a very long time studying to get there. So it was absolutely wonderful. Good time, very good time.
Did you have a favorite place on campus?
Yeah, well, yes, actually the library. And then they've remodeled the student union several times. I think every couple of years it gets a remodel anymore. At one time on the 4th floor, there was an area there where they had a little snack shack. I have no idea what the name of it was, a little snack shack. On the east side of that was a set of large windows, just ran down the wall. And for some reason I really liked studying there. And go and sit and study. If it rained, rain would hit the window panes, and it was a very quiet area. Had a couple of televisions up there with soap operas on, I think, most of the day. So that's actually where I would go. If I wasn't studying in the library, I would go and sit there and study. So those are probably my 2 favorite places. They also there used to be a dairy shack right across from the Ag Hall. And they've tore that down and built a new building there. I used to always go there, of course, and get coffee several times a day. Those were probably my 3 hangouts, I guess, for most of the time.
So you're studying a lot because it's a very grueling program.
I had to.
But did you have any time for fun? Did you go to sporting events or?
I this is the truth. I didn't do a whole lot of that, just because, the best way I can describe it for me, I had to study at least 4 hours a day, and I'm ADD. I'll admit it. Okay, so if there's any noise, if there's a radio or anything like that playing, I'm distracted because I'm going to pay attention to whatever else that is. And so I had to study at least, like I said, about 4 hours every night. And so the socialization had to be limited. We would go to some of the football games. At that time OSU lost every game.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that terrible to say? But it's the truth.
Yeah.
You'd go to football games, and at that time they allowed alcohol. And so you'd go to football games, everybody was drinking. And I can remember, I don't know, in the early 80s, I can remember they'd blow up those great big beach balls. And they would bounce those things all over the stadium. You'd be sitting there, you're actually paying more attention to where the beach ball was than what was going on the field. I mean, it's sad, but it was true. Those guys played hard and played their heart out. But my gosh, they'd like win 1 or 2, maybe 3 games a season. And so we did go to football games. I went to a few of the wrestling matches. Since I had wrestled in high school, I was always interested in that. So we'd go to a few of the wrestling matches. And, the animal science, they also are very good about having social mixers. And so, they had several different things. The Block and Bridle Club would have shows and different things. So I would go to some of those, and we would go to some of those. I'd go to some of the musicals there at the Serotonin Center, and I'm not sure do they do that somewhere else now, I guess. It's been quite a while, I guess.
They're still doing the Serotonin.
So, we do a few of those, but truthfully, most of my time was spent studying.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, as you're getting close to graduation from vet school, did you have any idea kind of what you wanted to do next?
Well, I didn't. What I really wanted to do was equine work.
Okay.
And equine and mainly large animal is what I really wanted to do, what my interest was in. I had done some preceptors where went to Texas, to Austin, down to by east of Austin, to an exclusive equine clinic there, and had done some equine work. Plus, I'd already done some cow work. Well, I actually did over Pryor for a little while and did cow work. And so, at that time, I was young and ready to tackle the large animal world, and trying to really study hard on herd health, those type of things. And so that was my direction, and that's what I worked the hardest towards.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're just the opposite. It's interesting how that works. Well, like when I first got out, I worked at Pryor, did mainly large animal for a few years, and then I decided to put this clinic in here, and we were about 87% large animal. Now we're just the absolute opposite. We're 87% small animal. Actually, I just checked the other day. We're like 89% small animal. So once again, a good thing you pay attention, and that's one of my main things about veterinary school. You still have your general degree. There's a lot of talk and a lot of people wanting about specialization. Should you go on, they have a large animal track that they've discussed, a small animal track, equine track. And I think that's good because the level of knowledge in each one of those species is grown tremendously. But the bottom reality is you don't know. In a 25, 30 year or longer career time, you don't know what you're going to be doing. And so when you start out with that general degree, you can go in any direction. And I'm a perfect case of that. We've ended up doing more small animal, and if that had been my only traditional training, I wouldn't have that flexibility. So.
Were you always interested in coming back home?
No, that was not my plan at all, actually. I worked at Pryor for a couple years, and what I had planned on doing was going to a larger practice where there were multiple veterinarians, preferably doing a lot of herd health work. And the reason I ended up here is my wife's family farm, her father had passed away, and her mother wanted to move off the farm, and they wanted us to move back and run it. And that was not in my plan. So no, when they first asked, I said, no, that's not what I'm interested in doing. But I finally gave in, and had never had a plan to come back to Locust Grove. Let's face it, these are good folks here. But this is one of those areas of Oklahoma that's socially, economically challenged. Most people here are good folks, working class folks. Your mean average income is not the greatest, as is true for an awful lot of Oklahoma. And so I knew all those things. But, you know, I gave in at the last, and we moved back on the farm, and I went ahead and put this practice in.
So did you do that solo, or did you partner with other doctors?
No, just me. Just me.
Well, we'll talk about some of the challenges of doing that.
Oh, my God. It's been a tremendous challenge. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. You know, there was a long period of time for years, especially when we were doing mainly large animals. You know, I would work 7 days a week. I would work 14 to 16 hours a day, especially in the spring, and not counting all the emergency calls at night. You know, at that time there was a lot of dairies here, and dairy people start work at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So you'd always get a call somewhere around then. You know, cow having trouble calving, milk fever cow, which is a cow that's just freshened and is low on calcium in her bloodstream. Always something. So you'd get a group of calls around then. Well then, you know, 9 o'clock or so is when your small animal business starts coming in. You have to take care of all those. Of the evening, all the folks that get off of work come home and find something wrong with the cow, horse, dog, whatever. You'd get another group of emergency calls late in the evening, and so I did that for several years. And then finally, one spring, which was extremely chaotic, I just about couldn't make it. I just not enough sleep, and I finally decided, you know what, this is not working. After all this time, I love this job, but this is killing me. And I'm not the only one that's been through that.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
been a lot of veterinarians through that, and so I made the decision then, you know, we're going to have to change something. And so we went to having people haul their animals in. And that was about 2000. We built this facility in 2000. And built a nice large animal park back there, and said, you know, if you want large animal work, you're going to have to bring it here. And so that changed. That started changing things a lot. You know, trying to be more organized. That windshield time kills you. You know, my gosh, you may run down towards Tahlequah, which is 25 miles from here. Your next call may be over towards Little Kansas, which is about 25 miles that way. And so, you know, that's what was killing me as far as time-wise is concerned. And so started making some changes, and over time, like I said, it has changed us. Plus, we've had a change in the demographics here in this area. You know, we've less cows, more people, and more people, more small animals. And so our area has changed too as well. And so now I get lots of sleep, which is wonderful. But yes, the lack of sleep, eating fast food every meal, you know, just trying to grab what you could. Went through lots of pickup trucks, you know, driving like a maniac, tearing those things up, and you know, and of course it takes a toll on your family life as well. Yeah. When you work all the time, you just don't have time left for your family, and that's not a good thing. And like I said, I'm not the only veterinarian that's went through that. Several have done the same thing. So that was a very trying time. Very trying.
So are you seeing more exotics now too in this area? You
know, we did for a while. That built up until the state changed their rules, which wasn't a bad thing. I've got a real good story about that. I used to have a picture of her. I don't know what we've done with it, but we had a client named Joe Parkhill, and he had a Bengal tiger named Sierra, and he bought her as a cub. And he'd bring her to the clinic on a leash. You know, we vaccinated her, dewormed her, and worked with her for 2 or 3 years, and she was wonderful. And we had some that had mountain lions, same deal. When they were young, they were wonderful. You know, like I said, we'd treat them like anything else. Just had to be a little bit more careful with them. Had some bears that we used to work on. But Sierra, she did really well, and her owner really got on the bandwagon about private ownership. The state at that time was starting to try to change the regulations and ban private ownership of the big cats. And he went down to the state 2 or 3 times, and really made big speeches about, this is crazy. You should be able to own these, and he was quite a force behind that program. And when about the time she was about 3 years old, we had another client that lives out towards Leach that had a bunch of antelope. And my gosh, those things are like a flock of geese. You walk into a pen and they're just like, whoosh, whoosh. They're wild. Well, my gosh, their little old legs, their bones in their legs are that like a pencil. Mm-hmm. And so they'd run, you try to do anything with them, they'd run into a fence. Break legs, break necks. Sad, a horrible thing. And so, of course, you try to minimize how you handle them, but they have to be tested, tuberculosis tested. The state requires you to do these things. So anyway, we went out and did some TB testing, and a couple of them broke their necks. And so the owner said, well, I got to do something with these. And I said, wait a minute. I know the guy that wants these. He owns a Bengal tiger. And so he called Joe, told him what the deal was. Joe said, oh, yeah. So the guy brought those antelope down. I think met him here at the clinic and gave them to Joe. Joe took them down. And he said he grabbed one and unlatched his gate and kicked his gate open because he was going to throw this in there with that tiger, like he'd done lots of other things. She went nuts. And just as he went to throw this antelope, they're not very big, but he went to throw this antelope in that pen, she attacked, and wrapped around him and this antelope, and was eating on this antelope and scratching him in the process. So he said he finally got loose, and she was just going wild, and he got the gate, and it was open to the outside. But he got around behind the gate in the pen and had the gate between him and this tiger. And he said finally she took the antelope and went and jumped in her pool. He had a swimming pool for her. He jumped in her swimming pool, and he got out and scared him to death. And she started cycling about that time, coming in the heat, and she changed completely.
Wow.
He used to lead her around. I had a picture of her leading her on a leash. When she got a little bit bigger, we would treat her, but we would put 2 leashes on her. That way we kind of had a little bit more control on her. He ended up giving her to some park because, see, most parks won't take them. After they've been raised by a human, they're not scared of people. So they won't run from people. They're more than likely to attack a person if they're not afraid of you. And so anyway, most parks won't take them. But anyway, he finally found a park to take him, and he made a 180-degree turn. After that, he was then on the bandwagon spokesperson for shouldn't have private ownership of these things. She scared him so badly that he completely changed his mind, completely. And so about that time, the state really changed their regulations on those. You couldn't have private ownership of those. You had to have your license as a rehabilitator or a breeder. Made it a lot more strict, and they should have. I think that was a good call because there was several of them that had these bigger cats in very minimal restricted areas, and I remember when we did a C-section on a cougar, and they brought her in a little old cage, and I couldn't get a hold of her, so we ended up letting her out on leashes so I could give her a shot so we could do a C-section. That owner was telling me, he said, "You're crazy." That's what he told me. He said, "You're crazy," but we had to get to her. But there was several people that had them and just had them in little enclosures that didn't mount to anything, and so I think it's a good thing. So don't do all that many exotics. We used to do, we do birds. We do a few birds. If there's anything tremendously wrong with a reptile or that, we usually refer those to Dr. Welch over at Forest Trails in Tulsa. So we do a little exotic, but mostly, routine medicine.
Well, you mentioned you spent some time in Africa working. Can you talk a little bit about?
Oh my gosh, how many hours do you have? You better have lots of time if you want to hear about Africa.
How'd you get overseas?
Well, see, I'm in the Army Reserve.
Okay.
And after I had gotten out whenever I graduated from veterinary school, And then after September 11th, I felt like that I should do something. And so I went ahead and got awarded a direct commission into the veterinary service of the Army, because I felt like I could help. And so in 2004, I got notified that I was going to be called up for active duty. And so initially we were supposed to go to Iraq. And only 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave, they changed the whole deal and said, "You're going to Africa." And I thought, what in the world is the Army doing in Africa? I didn't even know we had a mission in Africa. And so ended up, we had a mission there in the Horn of Africa that was out of Djibouti. Mm-hmm. And we did treatment, veterinary work and human work in Ethiopia, Djibouti, Kenya. My gosh, I can't remember them all now. Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, walked right along the edge of Somalia, and then Yemen. And we did work in Yemen as well. So that's how I got assigned over there. And my gosh, tremendous experience. I'm glad I went. It was, of course, hard on the practice. Mm-hmm. Since I knew that it was coming, I hired 2 veterinarians to take my place while I was gone. So I, tried to have everything taken care of as much as possible. And when we flew in to Djibouti, I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to be to Africa. Mm-hmm. It's right on the east coast, right on the very tip of the boot hill that they call it. So when you get out of the airstrip, when we got out of the airplane there at the airstrip, there's a dump on the south end of that airstrip where they burn all their trash and everything. Well, the wind was blowing that smoke over the airstrip. This was in the end of August, and it was just right at dark. It was 100 degrees, if not hotter. We got out of the airplane, and here's this thick smoke going over the airstrip and everything. One guy looks and said, "Oh my God, we went to hell."
Oh my gosh.
So, I lived in a tent for a year. I was in Djibouti 2 days, and then we went to Ethiopia. We went to an area called Gode, Ethiopia. It's in the southeastern corner of Ethiopia, and you've never been to a place like this. We stayed in what they called a hotel, which was an old compound that had, I think it was 7 rooms, made like an L. In the corner was where you're supposed to eat. Well, it wasn't a hotel. It was just some walls, basically, with half roofs. The rooms were all open to the outside. And oh my gosh, it was just filthy. So we got there just about dark. Like I said, I've only been in Africa 2 days. Get on an airplane, we fly to this little airstrip in Gode. They bus us out to this little hotel, and I couldn't sleep. You could hear all the noises, no lights. Of course, there's no electricity. And so about 2:30, I woke up, and I walked out to the fence. There was a boundary fence around this place. I walked out to the fence, just stood there, just to see. Well, daylight, but a little bit before daylight, the animals started going out with herders. They started taking the animals this way. They were almost going east. They were heading out. And then just got a little bit lighter, and I could see the people kind of come out to the road, and I was trying to figure out what they were doing. And then after I watched it, I finally realized what they were doing. They don't have outhouses. They don't have latrines. They get up out of their huts, and they would come to the road, and that's where they would relieve themselves. Mm. And I understood what I was smelling, because it stunk. And this place, it's just amazing. We had the opportunity to sit and meet with a village elder, and there's no water. This place has no water. It sits on top of a red dirt mound, kind of like Stillwater, the red dirt, not devoid, but it was completely devoid of vegetation. They had overgrazed it so much that the only thing left growing was these certain type of milkweeds sticking up all over the place. So they take the animals out and they go at least 13 to 18 kilometers in one direction trying to find something to eat. So they take the animals out at daylight. Well, the water for this place came from, there's a river about 2 miles away that was mud, just basically flowing mud. That's where they got their water. They had a donkey system set up. This is the craziest thing. These donkeys, they had a little cart that they hooked up behind them, had a barrel laid out on this barrel. No one was with them. These donkeys would walk 2 miles, follow this path 2 miles. There was kids at the river. And they would stand in the river, which had crocodiles in it. And I've got a picture of a crocodile in this river. These kids would stand in this river with buckets and they would fill these barrels up. And then these donkeys would make that trip back. And they had cisterns. They dumped this water, muddy water, in these cisterns. And then donkeys, that's what they did all day long. And they just make that trip. And so anyway, their water was this muddy water. And by the evening of the first full day that I was there, I had dysentery.
Oh no!
Yeah, I thought I was going to die. I'm serious. I laid there. We had no backup, no airflow, anything. I was stuck. And go to Ethiopia, and I had this horrible dysentery in this very filthy setting. And I actually thought, oh my gosh, I've traveled halfway around the world, and I'm going to die within 48 hours from dysentery because I thought I was going to die. We didn't have a doctor. We had a physician assistant with us. And, you know, he gave me ciprofloxacin and loperamide, and that's all we had. And you had IV fluids, that type of stuff. And so it took me 48 hours to get over that. So for the first 3 days, I'm just stuck right there. And I just can't explain to you how filthy it was. And when I finally got over it, enough that I could crawl basically around that compound, I thought, I'm going to find out what got me. Okay, because we had packaged food, we had our MREs, we had brought our bottled water. I hadn't handled anything, and you know, going from here to over there, you wash your hands, you carry a bottle of the hand sanitizer with you, and you use it like crazy. I had drank a glass of tea.
Oh.
And so what I find, I'd sit and watch this gal that they had hired to cook. And she was a native, couldn't speak a word of English. So I got to watching her when she was washing the breakfast. The day that I finally got to where I could walk, they'd eaten breakfast. I didn't eat anything. I was still trying to sip on water. And so I watched her. So she had this big pot she had cooked in, and you know, they squat. They sit on their haunches. They don't sit in chairs, really. So she squatted down, and she gets some soapy water and a rag, and she washes this pan. But I got to noticing one side of it never leaves the ground. So she washes, she turns it, she washes, she turns it. All the time, one side of this pan's on the ground. It's dirty. So when she gets done, she was supposed to be using bottled water to rinse and cook with. When she gets done, she reaches over and she gets this ladle out and pours and rinses, you know. So then I walk over and I look. It's the muddy water from the river. Okay. And then I asked her, you know, I got an interpreter over there. I said, okay, what's going on here? I said, you know, show me the water you're cooking with and show me the water that you're making the tea with. It was the river water. And she didn't bring the tea all the way to a full boil. Mm-hmm. Tea is what got me. And so, you know, her and I, we had this lesson on sanitation and hygiene. And, you know, no more of the river water. And so anyway, like I said, we had an opportunity to meet with the village elder. First thing I asked him was, you know, how come you don't move from here? I said, you know, there's nothing for the animals to eat. You don't have any water. It has to come from the river, and it's not good water. You know, why don't you move? Because they live in huts. I mean, literally, they just live in huts with thorn bushes made into a fence around it, and they bring their animals in, and some of the goats come into the hut. You know, people, the goats, everybody lives in the hut. So I asked, why don't you move? And he said, you know, you don't understand, to an interpreter. this is my father's 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 hut. You know, we have been here forever, and this is our home, and we can't. But you know, and I told us you can't exist without aid. Catholic charities, lots of people, organizations donate wheat, oats, rice, whatever. That's what they survive on. And so, you know, they milk their animals. They eat 1 meal a day. They milk the camels. They milk the goats. They mix it, you know, with the rice and the wheat and all that, and cook all that, and they eat 1 meal, big meal a day. That's lunch. You know, the rest of the time they drink goat's milk, unpasteurized goat's milk, camel's milk, and they survive on nothing, absolutely nothing. But they wouldn't even entertain the thought of moving. You know, most of us would think about, let's move. Mm-hmm. You know, if there's nothing here, let's go somewhere else. Well, they don't have anywhere to go. And that, you know, we had got to talking to one of the government representatives, and they had tried moving some of these tribes. It always caused a war. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, they said, you don't understand. You know, about 50 miles to the west was a low mountain range, and the rains kind of came to that, you know, because of the topographic features and rising air gets hot, and then when it rains, squeezes the water out of it when it cools off. There was a place about 50 miles to the west where basically the grass really started. And you know, I asked them, why can't you move them over there somewhere? I said, well, that belongs to another tribe. And if you take people from one tribe and you move them to an area of another tribe,
yeah,
there's going to be a killing, you know, because it just doesn't work that way. And so their system is actually more inflexible than I would ever thought. Mm-hmm. But you can't mix people from different tribes, and so it was very sad. You know, we did some veterinary treatment sessions there. The physician assistant, we had some nurses. They did some human treatments and stuff. You know, and they'd bring them the little babies up there, and you know, you couldn't help them. Really, you know, you're not set up as a critical care station. We would provide basic care. You know, polio vaccines, antibiotics, you know, lancing abscesses, those type of things. And the UN and WHO, they publish a bunch of data that says like 13% infant mortality rate in those areas and stuff. No, more like 50%.
Wow. There
in that particular village. Just horrible, the most unsanitary conditions you have ever seen. You can get a cut on your finger doing something, and a cut on your finger. Within 12 hours, your finger is that big around, swollen, red, infected, because there is so much human waste in the soil. You know, they don't have latrines, they don't have outhouses, so it's dry. That stool breaks down, gets down with the sand, wind blows, it aerosolizes it, blows it everywhere. So you've got all this bacteria, you get hot bacteria content in that soil. So you get a cut, boom, just like that. And so that to me had a tremendous effect on me, just going right to Africa and especially going to Gode right off the bat. I had never witnessed that level of poverty, that level of filth, lack of sanitation, and seeing people living in that day to day. And their water, I've got some photographs. We did some more treatment sessions in Kenya. We went to a place called, oh my goodness, Wajir. We flew into Wajir. We had 5 treatment sessions set up. And you know, I'd go set up these treatment sessions. Me and 2 other guys, we'd go fly around the country and drive out in these rented vehicles and meet these people. And to me, that was, you know, I'll get into that in just a minute. I'm talking about the water first. But anyway, we went and set these treatment sessions up. In this certain part of Kenya, what they basically had is ponds to drink out of. You know, that's where they had their water. You'd catch up in these ponds. You know how dirty a pond looks. Well, we were in this one village, I believe it was Ossaway or something like that. They had brought in about a herd of 200 goats, and me and another guy, we went over there and was treating abscesses, deworming all these goats. I had locked my cameras and stuff up in a case before I went over there. So we turned around and started back, and we're walking towards this pond. And it's very interesting. They bring the camels up. The camels had to get down on their knees and drink because they couldn't get in. They didn't want them in the water. And the cows, they kept the cows whipped back, trying to get them just to water. But the donkeys and the goats, they just kind of pile in this water. And so anyway, we're walking back towards this pond. Tank is what they call them. Same thing in Texas, I guess. And this guy's, he's bathing. You know, he's washing his arms and washing his face, you know, and he's standing knee deep in this water. And then he reaches down and he gets a double handful of water, and he brings it up and he starts to, and he's drinking it. And of course it's running between his fingers, and it's just as green can be, about as green as that cat. Just as green can be. And I'm watching him. He does this 2 or 3 times, and I looked at that guy that's with me and I said, "You and I drink that? We would be dead tomorrow. We can't handle that level of bacteria." But that's the water they survive on. And another example about the water, we were in Djibouti, the country of Djibouti. We were up in the northwest corner, and we were looking for places to treat animals, you know, and water, where they water them, best place in the world, because they all have to come to water. And so that's the best place to meet them, best place to do your treatment sessions. And so we came up on another one of these tanks, ponds, and you guys are young, you probably don't remember. Clint Eastwood used to make these old movies, High Plains Drifter, and have you ever seen one of those? You probably have never seen one, have you? Basically what it amounts to, when they start that movie, those movies, somewhere off in the distance you're looking in the desert, okay, and you can see these heat waves, and like a mirage, something comes and appears out of the desert. So anyway, we're at this tank, and it's down a long ways, and that water is nasty. And there's a little ravine that runs back off of this pond and heads off to the northwest. And there was 3 of us standing there, and I had an interpreter and another guy with me. And we were standing looking, and I'm looking up this ravine, and I get to noticing some white spots. What in the world is that? You know, it's sand, mainly all sand, some scrub brush. So I finally walk up to one, and I kick some of that sand off, and it's a carcass. It's a dead goat. And I thought, well, my gosh, you know, I wonder what happened here. Then I got to look, and I thought, well, what's that? I counted in about a quarter of a mile up this ravine, I counted 100 carcasses.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what's in this water, but it must be bad.
Mm-hmm.
So about that time we turned around and look, and like in one of those old Clint Eastwood movies, I could see something. Well, you know, all the ladies there, they all wear robes, and they're very colorful. The brightest orange, the brightest reds.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see a color, so we just stood there and watched. So pretty soon here come these 3 African gals, and they're all carrying these 5-gallon water jugs. They look like gas cans. World Health, all over Africa. They give them away free. They're all over Africa. They're yellow plastic cans with red lids. And so here these gals come carrying their water jugs. You know, I'm excited. So they get up here, and all 3 of them, they line up and they start getting that water. So I get that interpreter over there, and you know, introduce us, tell us who we are, and all that kind of stuff. So I said, you know, the first question, I said, my gosh, do you guys drink this water? You know, and they all 3, you know, kind of turn around and look at me at the same time, like, well, he's an idiot. You know, kind of a look. So they tell him, of course we drink this water. So, you know, my next question is, my gosh, does it make you sick? You know, do you have diarrhea? You know, so he asks them. Well, they tell him they don't give it to the children because it burns their throat, makes their tongue swell, and gives them diarrhea. But the adults drink it. Okay, so, you know, here I am, naive white guy. The next question then, not the first, but the next question is my gosh, why do you drink it? Well, you know, same thing. They all 3 and turn around and look at me again. Like, boy, he's a specialist. He's special. You know, their answer was, it's the only water they had. It's the only water within 25 miles. And so they had to drink it. And I just thought it was incredible. Well, I took some samples of it, but where we were at, it was 2 weeks. before I could even get them to where I could send them on the airplane. Well, they couldn't grow anything out of it. Best they could tell, it was salt, saline. Well, high salt content will kill an animal, makes their brain swell. And so I don't know if it was just because it was salt or if there was something else in it. But that's all the water these people had, and it was killing these animals. That's how bad it was. And that's what they face is the water. But that goes in the next story. I asked you how much time you had. That goes in my next story. We were in the central part of Ethiopia, and we went to this village called Get. There's an old rail line that the British built over 100 years ago between Djibouti, which is on the coast, and Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. And that's what they use for commerce. Well, the old rail line is still there, and this thing has got the most dilapidated engine and cars. They're just beat. They look like crumpled aluminum cans. Okay, and the truckers blow up the track every few days because the truck drivers, they want the business. They don't want the train. They don't want the train carrying anything. So it's an interesting story. But anyway, on the halfway point of this railroad track, when they built it, they drilled a well and they hit good water. Okay, well, this village sprung up around this wellhead. So there were some army guys in a civil affairs unit. I can't even speak. They wanted us to do a treatment session around Dawa, which is the second largest city in Ethiopia. And we went and looked at it and said, it's too big. We're a small unit. There was 12 people on our medical team. My interpreter, his name was Elisha, girl's name, but he was a guy, wonderful guy. And he even told me, he said, there's too many people here. He said, you won't be able to control them. They're good folks, but they don't like standing in line. Everybody wants to be first. When you start handing things out, it's difficult to control the level of excitement there. Okay? And when you're handing out medicine, they all want medicine. And so, he told me, he said, you won't be able to control this. And so we come up with an alternative, which was this village again. So it took us 3 hours to drive to this village. Just bump down a river, dry river bed and everything to get to this place. When we got out, the first thing I noticed was these people were clean. I had the physician, Gus Ramos, with me. And we got out, and the first thing I poked him, I said, look at these folks, they're clean. The dresses were all bright clean. And the kids, the Africans are very touchy people. They want to touch, they want to hold you. When they stand next to you, they don't stand next to you. They lean against you. That's just the way those folks are. So everywhere you go when you get out, they want to come and touch you. In one village, we were the first white people they'd seen in 12 years. And so the little kids would just come up and just grab a hold of, oh my gosh, a white guy. They just don't ever get to see one. And so anyway, this particular village, when all the kids run up there, first thing you get noticing is they all had a full head of hair. They didn't have ringworm. They didn't have scabies because that's prevalent over there just because of sanitation. So these kids are all clean. And so I'm saying, well, something really unusual going on here. The village elder in that case was a woman. It was the only one we went to that the village elder was a woman. And she said she was 100 years old. She looked like it. But we sat down and had a talk with her, so through the interpreter. So I asked, I said, okay, your people are very clean. They look very healthy. Your children are clean and healthy. What's going on? How is this so? She told us. She said, way back a long time ago, she said the train stopped and a nun got off the train. And she said she decided to live with us. So she lived with us. And they said, oh, she was mean. But she made us wash and made us clean and showed us how to wash and how to clean. And she said we have good water. We have plenty of water. And so I don't know how long the nun stayed. They could not remember the nun's name. But she must have been tough because those folks, it was very interesting. They have these water troughs, good water. They'd fill these water troughs up. And the watering of the livestock is very orchestrated. You just don't picture You know, you think about in the middle of nowhere, no electricity, no education, you wouldn't think about how organized they are. But it's by family, by tribe. They have certain times. They get to rotate in, water their animals, rotate out, and there's no gray area. I mean, you've only got a certain amount of time, and it's and it moves quickly. But anyway, these gals, and that's who does most of the herding, is the gals. They'd bring these little flocks of sheep and goats and stuff in, camels. They'd bring them in, but the first thing they'd do is they'd grab these kids by the ears and they'd throw them in this water trough, and they'd wash these kids up, and then they had a area set up where they'd go behind the curtain and clean up. And some of them had taken to the extreme, they'd wash these goats. You know, they had a lot of water. And they'd wash these goats and stuff, and it was incredible because it was the healthiest. We treated 63,000 animals in that year we were there, 12,000 people. But that one village was the healthiest people, the healthiest animals. Granted, it was a lot because they had good clean water, which was rare. But also that one person, that nun, had taken the time to teach these people sanitation and hygiene. And I don't know how she did it, but she did it in such a way that they were still scared of her because they still did it. Wow. And it made all the difference in the world. And so that has also had a very lasting impression on me. One person can make a very big difference, can last a long time, even in the middle of nowhere. That's the truth. But anyway, we traveled, like I said, several places all over the country. Met a lot of good people. We went to OSU's sister school, Alma. Remember that? Can you remember that? Can you pronounce it? It's in Ethiopia. It's east of Deradawa, or excuse me, west of Deradawa. Alma. It's U-L-M-A, Alma. I can't pronounce it. But we went over there, and we were actually over there. Dr. Wagner, retired from OSU, animal science, nutritionist. He was actually there when I was there. He was in the same hotel, I didn't even know it. I went and introduced myself to him. He had been there when they set that university up and had went back for a visit, and I happened to be there, and I missed a heck of an opportunity to meet up with him. But we had went to that old university, and an interesting thing, away from that old university, they took a whole bunch of tractors and plows and stuff over there. That was part of that program, and they showed them how to use them and all that kind of stuff. You'll find those old tractors and bulldozers abandoned all over the place. They drove them till they broke down, and then they stripped them. And so, you know, the blocks and everything are still sitting there. It's so dry and it doesn't rust. You know, I mean, it rusts, but it doesn't rust away. So that's been 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, or whatever, how long. You'll find them out in the middle of nowhere. You'll be driving along and you'll run across one of those little bulldozers out in the middle of nowhere that was part of that program. They just left them, you know, and that's kind of the philosophy there. You know, you use it till it breaks down, then they strip it. That's it. You know, it's quite interesting, very very interesting. So yes, I can keep talking for hours about Africa. Everybody should go, and I'm telling you, for sure. Everybody needs to go to Africa. You know, the people there, the majority of the people are wonderful. You know, they're bright. They're you know, my gosh, they can move. That it's amazing. You know that they could change the world if they had the opportunity. But most of them will never have the opportunity. You know, they can go to school. Some of them will get programs where they can come to the United States and everything else. But when they go back, there's no jobs. There's nothing for them to do. And the main reason for that is because of stability. Africa's unstable. And, you know, whoever is in charge today may not be there anymore. And because of that, you can't build toward the future. I mean, you know, why do you have a savings account? You have a savings account because you're planning for the future. You know, if you put in a small business, you're putting in that business in hopes that you can make a return on your income in the future, that you'll have something there that can take care of you, supply you income. Well, when everything's so unstable that every little bit they have a breakdown in the system, you can't plan forward. You can't plan forward, and so that lack of stability, I think, has a lot to do with what's wrong with Africa. So we also got to go to Yemen. We were the first team in Yemen since 1981. And Yemen is a whole completely different culture than Africa. Of course, in the eastern part of Africa, east part of Ethiopia, they're Muslims as well. Yemen, of course, the majority of the people there are Muslims, and I got to working with their Department of Agriculture, and I went back now 4 times to Yemen. I was there 2 years ago in August, and once again, talking about people, most of the people in Yemen are good people. They are just like everybody else. They're trying to make a living, trying to take care of their families, all those type of things. They're not out to get every infidel. I have some very good friends in Yemen, and veterinarians that I've met and worked with. My gosh, I've had meetings there where I sat with their Minister of Agriculture, their director of their veterinary quarantine operation. Wonderful conversations with those gentlemen, and they're very, very good people. And they want to do good for their country. But once again, you've got that tremendous stability problem and poverty like you just can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Those people live every day in a level of poverty that, there are some areas in the United States where there is some poverty. But I have yet to see anything that would equal the level of poverty that's present in Yemen.
Mm-hmm.
And not just Yemen, Africa as well. But, right now I feel for them. They're getting bombarded like crazy. I've sent emails to some of the veterinarians that I work with over there and haven't had any response at all. They asked me to help design their main quarantine for the country. And so I went over there several times designing this quarantine and got to go back over and see it get started.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what kind of shape it's in now, and so I invested an awful lot of time in that agricultural program, and I'd like to see them do well. All that, of course, because of my veterinary degree and my knowledge as far as large animals. So once again, that's where your large animal part pays off. And that was a tremendous experience, getting to go over there and working with their agriculture sector. And it's amazing. Here in the United States, so many things that you take for granted are disease control. Okay, we have very, very strong USDA, and they work very hard on controlling entry of disease in the United States, and outbreaks of disease. Over there, disease is so rampant, and there's so little control
Mm-hmm.
over disease that it's the contrast. The contrast is almost mind-boggling. You can't perceive it, and that's why. Talking about going to Africa, going to places like Yemen, I think everybody in the United States ought to go somewhere like that, and it helps you appreciate what we have. Just to be born in the United States is a blessing beyond measure, because you're born into a situation where even if you're poor, horribly poor, you still have the opportunity to improve yourself and to bust out of that social setting, economic setting, and excel. And there's, my gosh, read the newspaper. Read lots of stories. They don't have that opportunity over there. Their poverty is so extreme. Their level of opportunity to advance. I'll give you a perfect example in Yemen on the jobs. Say I want a job. I've got 2 choices. Either I go do whatever the family business is. If the father is a jeweler, okay, I go as an apprentice and do the family business, or I have to go pay someone to give me a job, and then I have to pay them out of your paycheck. Every time you get a paycheck, you have to pay them for that job. So they get very little money. So, but those are the only 2 opportunities you have. There's no other opportunity there, none, for those folks, and that's what they're faced with every day. And for the women, there is no job. They're only allowed to go to school till they're 8 years in the 8th grade, and then they're supposed to get married and have children. 7 camels. Okay, you're worth 7 camels, and so that's the whole deal. The dowry.
Mm-hmm.
The dad wants lots of daughters. He wants sons, of course, so they can work. Lots of daughters because the daughters are worth 7 camels, and so I mean that's the deal. I mean that's just the way it is, you know you it's hard to escape from that, and but that's their culture also. A lot of them don't want to escape from that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had the opportunity to talk to several of the Yemeni while we were doing our treatment sessions, you know, and asking the women, you know, how would you like to, would you change and all this? A lot of them don't want to change. They don't want Western style. They don't want Western way of life. They perceive it to be not good for the family, you know, and that's something that I think we also fail to appreciate. Their family values are very, very, very strong. Their family unit is very strong. It's the grandmother, okay, the matriarch, who says whether they have to wear the full hijab, the face piece, or not. It's not the men. Okay, everybody has this perception is it's those dang men. Granted, they're a large part of the problem. Okay, don't misunderstand me.
Yes.
Okay, not one bit. But it's very interesting. The full hijab, the gloves, the matriarch says whether they have to wear those or not. And the mother, okay, she's the one that picks the bride. The guy doesn't pick the bride. The mother picks the bride. And so they have pretty good control over what little they have to control.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not really interested in changing that. You know, and it's because it's cultural, it's traditional. And you know, for them, their religion is not separate. You know, I've got a good picture. We went to a school. This was a middle school, and they had finished the first floor, but they had never finished the second. And these kids were crammed in there like sardines. There was 50 girls in a classroom this size. I'm serious. I mean, they were just crammed. You know, they were just crammed in there because they didn't have enough money to finish the second floor. And so the ambassador for Yemen, he's the one that eventually got the funding to finish the second floor. But anyway, the Army didn't have enough money, so the Army has so much money to use on these projects, but it's pretty limited. Well, you know, of course, the State Department has a lot more money than the Army does. So, but anyway, we were walking through this classroom, and I've got a picture of the map of the world for these Yemeni students. And the map of the world for these Yemeni students is basically the east coast of the United States to about the west side of China, mainly the Middle East. And the only countries that are colored, the only countries that really teach are the Muslim countries. That's at that level. They start them very young, and it's because their religion is not separate from their daily lives. Their religion is not separate from their government. Their judges are not legal judges. They're actually religious judges. They make their decrees and their judgments based on religious law. And so it permeates every sector of their life. And so because of that, you can't hardly separate, say like in Yemen, how the businesses run, how their government agencies work. You can't separate it from the religious side of things because that's the basis for everything. And so the women, you look at most religions, okay? Who's the strongest members of most religions? Who really keeps that religion going? It's the women, okay? And I don't mean that derogatory or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is. And it's the same way for them. They're the ones that really enforce an awful lot of that. And so it's very it's complex. It's not as easy as just saying, get out of that mess, you know, because it's your lifestyle. And so, like I said, I've had some conversations with some very knowledgeable people, much, much more knowledgeable than I, about how to change that structure and change your lifestyle. And you know what? I don't have any answers. Lots of questions. I have lots and lots of questions because they need help.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have problems too.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
We do.
our large cities are more violent. I was all over Yemen, and I was told later I wasn't supposed to go all over Yemen, but I was all over Yemen. I never once felt like that I was in deathly danger. I was in some situations I probably shouldn't have been in, but nothing, horrific. Okay, there's some of our larger cities I would not dare to go in the central part or certain parts of those cities. So we have lots of problems here.
Well, it seems like it was a good eye-opening trip for you.
Gosh, yeah, it changed me. It changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond a shadow of doubt, it changed my life. I feel like it made me a better person.
Mm-hmm.
At least, definitely, much more aware of the adversities that a lot of people have to face compared to us. And so, yes, I think everybody ought to go. Ought to be mandatory for college students. Absolutely, ought to be mandatory.
Well, you kind of touched upon this earlier in the interview about changes here in Locust Grove.
Oh, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about changes through the years? You've grown up here, you've returned here.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
This of course is a very rural, very slow paced. You were talking about comparing to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very slow paced. But probably the main way to measure that is conveniences. As an area becomes more modernized, more urbanized, you start getting more conveniences. I can remember a time when there was one bank, and that bank closed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and on Saturdays it was open from 8 to 12. There was no ATMs or anything else. If you didn't get your cash during the main part of the day, you were out of luck. You're out of luck. And same way for holidays or anything else. No ATMs. So one of the biggest conveniences, of course, is when Locust finally got its first ATM, which wasn't until the 90s. Like in the mid-90s or something, before it got its first ATM. And food, choices for food. Now we have a neighborhood market, which is a tremendous convenience. Nothing against OOHRP, which is a wonderful group in themselves. But of course, everybody likes choice. Another thing is the roads. And we talk about that in college. You talk about, especially in history, in economics, farm to market roads, farm to market transportation. Is a country, that's one of the things that we've been able, the reason we've been able to excel, is our farmers can produce a wonderful product, but they also have the ability to get it to market. A lot of countries, that's a difficult thing. I did, when I was in Yemen, I did this livestock study all over the country. That's how I ended up going all over the country. And a lot of those farmers have no way of getting their livestock to market. Okay? So they end up selling to this local guy that has a truck. He has a way of transporting. So he gives them nothing. Okay? They don't get much. But they also don't get any market information. They don't even know what the market is in the main city 200 miles away. They don't know what the market is. So they sell it to this local guy for almost nothing. He hauls it. He sells it to another guy. And just like here, except the difference is our farmers are informed. They know what the market is. They're not gonna let this rascal give them nothing. Okay? So here's the same way. Most of the roads around here used to be gravel. My gosh, you have flats all the time and everything else. Now they're mostly paved, so you can get somewhere much more quickly, and you don't have to worry about your tires flat. Internet's the same way. At first, everybody had satellite internet. HughesNet, Blue, something, I don't remember what it was. That was the only way you get internet. And then the phone company, thank goodness, through technology advancements, started carrying it, so you could get rid of the satellite, and you finally could get on the internet, which took quite a while, actually, to be able to get on the internet, and then be able to get high rate speed. That took quite a while, so that was awfully nice to see that come in. I know Vanessa at the library has talked about that. She finally got her T1 feed in, so now all of our patrons several of them get on computers at the same time. For a long time, if over 3 of them got on the computer at one time, it would just crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you bet, technology has been wonderful. The roads, finance, groceries, those are probably the main things, I guess. So it's changed over time,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that would be the main things.
How do you remain connected to Oklahoma State these days?
What I mainly do is I go down for the continuing education classes, and we refer patients to the university for certain reasons. Some ophthalmology cases, horses, sometimes we'll refer down there. So because of that, we've got a pretty open dialogue with the university and the veterinary staff, lay staff as well. And like I said, I normally go down at least once a year, go down and do some of the continuing education. I do continuing education all over the place, but I will go down there usually once a year specifically just so I can see some of the veterinarians and connect and reconnect with some of the folks down there. I haven't went on the tour of the veterinary school lately. I used to do those, but I haven't went on the tour of the veterinary school lately.
Give them a couple months. They're building that new
that's what I
addition
heard.
To the hospital.
So I'm going to have to go down there and go through that,
Mm-hmm.
see what that looks like. But that's those are the two main ways that I stay connected with the university.
You know, looking back on your career and your path to OSU and everything you've done after graduation, how did earning your degrees from the university impact your life?
Well, kind of like the trip to Africa, changed my life completely. You know, I'm from a small town, didn't have much knowledge of the world or anything else. This was pretty well all I had knowledge of. And you know, the main thing I think that what it does is that it expands your ability to learn, it expands your knowledge base. And by doing that, it gives you the tools to take advantage of what opportunities come that might present themselves, and you have no idea what those will be. And so my knowledge that I gained and your social skills that you gain while you're in school allowed me to interact. Like I said, I've worked with some ministers of agriculture and everything else, and I'm just a little old guy from Locust Grove. You know, and all that was made possible really by my education from OSU, and so I'm deeply indebted to the opportunities that going to college gave me. So I got in trouble one time. I used to do, and I still do, some career days for these high schools, and I actually was over at Chodo, and you know, there's a large Amish community there, and I said everybody should go to college. There's no reason why everybody doesn't make it their goal to go to college. They asked me not to come back. But I believe that. You know, I believe that. And you know, like even with folks, you know, like the Amish community, highly traditional community, very good people. Mm-hmm. And I would mean nothing derogatory towards them at all, because I think the world of them. Even though it's their tradition not to go to college, they're all involved in agriculture in some way or another. They could learn. They could learn some things that they could take back and not violate their premise, you know, but help with newer techniques of agriculture, different ways of doing things. So I actually still believe that everybody can benefit from college, from obtaining a college degree. Not everybody's going to use it. You know, some people may rather just do a technical level job, plumbing or whatever, but they'll still use some of the knowledge they've gained in college, whether they like it or not. And so I think everybody should go. I truly believe that. It's opened up my world to all kinds of opportunities, and I don't see any reason why I can't do the same for just about everybody.
Well, as we kind of wind down our interview today, tell me a little bit about your family, your children.
I only have one son, John. He did go to OSU. he didn't graduate from there. He ended up coming home. He graduated from NSU. That's where he ended up graduating. A former wife, I guess to say that correctly, she ended up working for the university, and she actually got her law degree from TU, but she worked for just up to the last year or so. She actually went to work for the state of Oklahoma. But we've all been associated with OSU one way or another. John now is, my son is married to a very nice lady that had 3 children, and so now between the two of them they have 6 children, and so we try to take them to the Branson and everywhere else, so we enjoy that immensely, of course. Grandchildren are wonderful. You can take and spoil them rotten and then send them home. It's not my job to train them to be good citizens. That's their parents' job. My job is to have fun with them. And so we spend mainly, we run the farm, run the practice, and mess with the grandchildren. That's what we do more than anything else.
Well, great. Is there anything else you'd like to touch upon before we close on out today?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering it. It's just that, go Pokes. That's the main thing, I guess.
Well, Dr. Fleming, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to meet with us.
Well, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I can talk for hours.